experienced at a more heightened level this volatility in pricing. So I use this slide again to really articulate and share with you these basis differentials and how they can be impacted by hurricane and weather-related events. Now, I will say this, as a result of some of these anomalies, and I guess we shouldn't use those kind of words because weather events that we never thought of, like derechos and polar vortexes, I often use the term with my colleagues, maybe someday we might face a solar vortex, God forbid. But the reality is these weather events are obviously wreaking havoc in our power market structure. So as a result of the polar vortex here in Pennsylvania, the PJM interconnect enacted a new capacity performance reform. By the way, we had close to a 24% forced outage rate during these 2 dates. That means 24% of our power generators that had capacity obligations did not show up and produce power during those 2 days. You also had another real fallout in the area of retail electric choice markets where customers were signed up for variable rate generation supply contracts. And here in our state, New Jersey, Delaware, there was and even the state of New York, where customers were caught up in these retail contracts that were resetting pegged to wholesale power prices that went all the way up to $500 per kilowatt hour, which is 50 cents, per megawatt hour, which was 50 cents per kW pricing on their reset retail rate. And then lastly, thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Cheryl LaFleur, FERC Commissioner Cheryl LaFleur, and former Commissioner Phil Mueller, there was a discussion that the FERC tried to implement around this whole notion of electric-gas coordination. And again, it was all a result of these weather events known as the 2004 polar vortex. I'd like to jump into my next slide because it really, when you talk about the benefits of shale gas to the end user, and in Commissioner Burman, in my case, it's our consumers here in our states, it's hard not to take into account the direct pass-through cost savings that customers are enjoying right now. You know, before becoming a public utility commissioner, I have to be honest here, I have a confessional, I probably never read my electric or gas bill. And now, more than ever, being the energy geek that I am, I read it. And what I saw most recently was my gas company, which happens to be the top one on the slide there, PECO, sent a bill stuffer out articulating from 2008 to current day that customers have seen close to a 65% savings on their natural gas bill. And I share with you just here in Pennsylvania that on average, gas purchase costs, if you look at that third line item from 2008 to 2015, that percentage change, on average, customers here in Pennsylvania have seen a 63% savings in terms of gas purchase costs. That means the local distribution company, the gas distribution company that has to go out and procure gas on the interstate pipeline and bring it back into the system for customers, on average, those cost savings, those gas purchase costs have dropped on average of 63%. And I will put an economic development hat on here this afternoon to share with you that it also had a profound impact in states like New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and Maryland, and even Delaware, where we're seeing companies that would traditionally not look at the Northeast markets for relocation purposes or, in some cases, expansion purposes, that you're seeing a real renaissance of what we see as companies that traditionally were offshoring, are companies relocating to other areas for obviously cheap electric prices and gas prices. Well, that paradigm shift is taking place right now, and I think a huge driver in that is obviously this reduction in not only wholesale power prices, but gas purchase costs. And one other silver lining is customers at the industrial and residential levels of customers that can fuel switch over to natural gas. And again, it's a story that that again doesn't grab a lot of headlines in the print media or the trade publications, but it's something I want to highlight here this afternoon. And let me also share with you that if we look at how we price natural gas in our markets, a lot of it is pegged to one hub, and that's Henry Hub, which is based in the Houston area. And I just want to share with you, I pulled this stat off today with Crystal Sakavage on my staff. And so here it is, that in Pennsylvania, over the last 12 months, the average light hub price is $1.21 per MMBTU. It's almost a $1 discount to $2.41 per MMBTU Louisiana, Henry Hub benchmark gas. So that is another unbelievable story where just on basis, meaning transportation costs into the gate, whether it's Boston, New York, other parts of the Mid-Atlantic region, customers are getting that benefit. So I just share that with you because, again, I think it's a very powerful story on so many different levels as it impacts the food chain of utility customers. I use that word food chain. Residential customers, commercial, industrial, small business customers, and then obviously our large industrials. The next slide is one that really looks at some of the high-level pipeline projects that are real-time or in the FERC 7C application process. And I just put, these are not back of the envelope, these are the numbers of projected costs of these projects. And some of them, by the way, are fully subscribed before being certificated. But Atlantic Sunrise is a $3 billion project. Penn East, which is one of our local utilities, UGI, on their unregulated side, has a pipeline that is sourcing Northeast Marcellus gas into the markets of New Jersey and potentially into New York. And then more recently, there's been some controversy around the Northeast Direct project, which is a $3.3 billion project. And Northeast Direct is really, if you were asked a pipeline engineer or a development team at one of the, whether it's Spectre or Kinder Morgan or Williams, you know, Northeast Direct is really the pathway forward to creating price stabilization in the New England market. And I just share that with you because there's been a lot of I'll say, consternation among certain policymakers around the Northeast Direct project and how we basically create a financial model for this project to go forward. And then lastly, Mariner East 1 and 2. Mariner East 1 is already up and running. It's a Pennsylvania PUC certificated pipeline. Mariner East 2 is a project that will be going for further conversation. More recently, our Department of Environmental Protection announced, I think it was last week or maybe today, that they're going to have 5 public input hearings across the state. But basically, this project is one that will tie into a few slides down the line here, but this project is bringing NGLs, natural gas liquids, from southwestern Pennsylvania into our port complex, our refinery complex in the greater Philadelphia region. I'll talk about that here momentarily. But again, total investment alone, and by the way, I didn't put in this slide any of the other projects, meaning projects like Cove Point, which is an LNG export facility in Lusby, Maryland, all the pipe connection that's taking place with that project around Marcellus. But this is a $10.3 billion investment opportunity. It's been great for companies like U.S. Steel and all the different supply chain companies that are playing in this market space. I'm going to move now over to a slide that basically talks about the Marcellus BTU characteristics and how it is now creating this new opportunity. You know, by all reasonable benchmarks, if you talk to the industry leadership, our own Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Energy, the National Energy Administration, Marcellus is roughly will be producing 500 trillion cubic feet of potential production over the next 75 to 100 plus years. And we also have, as part of that, roughly 150 million barrels a day of recoverable, not per day, of recoverable ethanes that can be processed and brought to markets. And I share that with you because right now, from Pennsylvania all the way up to the Boston metro area, there's no regional markets for ethane production. Basically what happens now, if you look to that lower circle that is right below the City of Champions, known as Pittsburgh, and I'm a Philadelphia person, so I have to let you know that as a footnote. But you see just south of Pittsburgh, that whole southwest area, Greene County, Pennsylvania, this is where we're seeing prolific extraction of natural gas liquids. Well, right now, if you look to the far left, you'll see kind of a purplish line. That's an interstate, I believe that's the Texas Eastern Pipeline that runs all the way down to Texas and Louisiana. And what we're finding statistically is roughly 75 to 80% of those ethanes get captured and shipped on those pipelines down to those two states, because the Gulf Coast, as mentioned in my next slide, is really the premium ethane market because of the ability to the ethanes and process the ethane. Again, there's no regional market right now for ethane. There is for extraction, but for processing and what we call ethylene or liquefaction capability, that does not exist. Well, I'm here to tell you that over the next 18 to 36 months, you're going to see some real changes taking place where we're able to source these ethanes into a northeast market. And again, part of that is we don't have the liquefaction capabilities currently in our marketplace. I'm going to turn to the next slide because, again, that kind of sets up, you look at this pipeline infrastructure around the Houston shipping channel all the way over to Mount Belvieu and then into parts of Louisiana. And again, you have substantial logistical infrastructure that currently exists. And that's changing right now, and it's changing in a good way, because if you look at current expansion plans and studies that are evaluating, one was just announced in the state of Pennsylvania, and that is the Shale cracker project, which is going to take place just north of Pittsburgh in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. And I should let you know that project was 4 years in the making, and Shell has finally announced that they're going to go forward with a $4.3 billion investment, and that's a real game changer. Going back to my earlier point, there's no market for ethane manufacturing now with an investment like the one we're seeing here in Beaver County, and others like Dow Chemical, Sasol, for most of plastics and Occidental Chemicals. These are just some of the projects now that are going to be taking place. And again, I think it's great not only for the Gulf complex, the Gulf Coast, but it's also now creating opportunities in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So when we turn to the next slide, ethane is really, for those chem engineers on the line today, it's the true feedstock to not only the plastics industry, but all the other byproducts that can be created. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the ME, if you see that dotted line, which I'm pointing to now, and by the way, so you have the star there in Philadelphia, and then you have the star down on the Chesapeake Bay, which is Cove Point, which is the first LNG export facility to receive an approval here on the eastern seaboard. And then that star up in Philadelphia represents 3 major refinery complexes. But that dotted line is that 70,000 barrels of ethane that are now moving into Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania. And I mentioned this at the presentation I gave in Williamsburg. You know, it was almost 3 years ago where Sunoco, and we all know that name, where Sunoco was taking West Nigerian crude and bringing up the Delaware Bay to those refineries, and they were doing really well. Well, guess what happened? China has basically come into Africa and has taken over every major piece of mineral resource available, whether it's uranium, whether it's crude, natural gas, and that basically forever changed the fate of Sunoco in terms of bringing tankers over and processing that at their refineries. In fact, Sunoco at one point in calendar year 2012 was losing $1 billion in their refinery production. And the board of directors made a very difficult decision, but announced that these 2 refineries that are, one of them is the largest on the eastern seaboard by the Philadelphia International Airport, were going to close. And I'm proud to say that because of labor, business, Republican and Democratic leaders, and our U.S. Senate, our governor, our congressional delegation all came together, and here we are today, just using the project, we're taking 70,000 barrels on a legacy pipeline and moving it. You know, people might ask the question, why to Europe now? Well, again, to the earlier slide, we don't have the liquefaction capability in place at that facility. We will. It is forthcoming. It's been talked about by Sunoco Logistics. But the first shipment of those ethanes moved in early spring of this year by a European chemical company known as Inos Chemical. And ME2, which I mentioned earlier, sets up an opportunity to take 345,000 barrels of ethane into the Philadelphia refinery marketplace. Again, a great opportunity for our region, and more importantly, a great opportunity for the entire Northeast corridor. But I set these 2, this map really sets up, you know, you have ME1, which drives all the way out into Sarnia, where there's a cracker facility up in Canada, and this just shows you the flows coming out of southwestern Pennsylvania and where they're going. And I always like to look at, I always put it on this slide, the Cove Point LNG export facility. You know, think back to 2008. As a country, we were importing natural gas. You fast forward to today, where arguably projects like Cove Point, Sabine Pass down in Louisiana, and some of the announced West Coast facilities, one in Oregon in particular, that these projects, now here we are today, where we're exporting natural gas, and looking at just Cove Point alone, which I've been to, Cove Point is not only an environmental success story, but all that gas is being sourced locally in Pennsylvania, and it's fully under contract before they even reverse the flows, which is, again, another success story around how the U.S. can dominate the LNG export marketplace. The next slide is one that just really, I mean, just going back to my earlier point of looking at 500 trillion cubic feet of total resource in the ground here in Pennsylvania, not including Utica, which we share with Ohio. But I mean, if you look at the top chart on a projection, you're looking at about 11,000 potential BCF a day of production, and the dotted line is more of a conservative trend line looking out to 2020, where we could have close to 8 BCF of production. in Pennsylvania today, that May 2016 is showing something more in the magnitude of 3.8 to 4 BCF a day. And again, this story just keeps unfolding just around the prolific nature of the production. And another thing, going back to an earlier slide, was Pennsylvania is kind of in a unique spot of, to the northern side of the state, where you see the slide I showed you earlier, where you really have dry, often referred to as Gucci gas, where it's pipeline ready. It doesn't need to be treated. It just can be sourced into a market, whereas the southwestern extraction is more of an NGL-like characteristic. And again, both are, whether it's in the area of feedstock or just home heating, we're kind of in this very unique situation that we have these two, the NGL market opportunity and the cheap source natural gas in the northern tier of Pennsylvania. So I shift over to really something that, I mean, we should be amazed at as a country, but it really drives this ethane opportunity and refinery capability. But this just shows you how globally competitive. I mean, here we are, we're in a presidential election, and we talk about, the issue of fair trade, and we talk about, back in the mid-2000s, all these companies that offshored, and we're losing this manufacturing, and all that, political hysteria. But this stat shows you that the U.S. is the second lowest cost ethane market in the world. And it's getting actually lower. Now, we compete with the Mideast on that. But again, due to significant increases in ethane production, and this has, again, created an onshoring environment for companies like DuPont and Sasol and Sunoco Logistics, where that investment, which was commonly looked at as an abroad opportunity, now coming to the U.S. And I think that's an unbelievable opportunity. I talked earlier from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, economic development perspective, how we're using natural gas to source industrial relocation opportunities, expansion opportunities, but this whole petrochemical processing opportunity, and it's all being driven, again, around cheap cost of ethane production. That last bullet point, a projected $33 billion of peak investment opportunity in the year 2018, and that's just amazing. Even as a footnote in there, the cheap, we're pulling gas at, as I mentioned earlier, at $1.21, that we have this opportunity, again, to really, harness petrochemical manufacturing and liquefaction capabilities around ethane. So it's a story that, again, I think most rank and file consumers don't understand it. I do think, again, it's helped Pennsylvania as we've kind of come through this slow period of growth. And again, it's a story that's impacting the entire Mid-Atlantic corridor in a very positive way. So let me turn to the next slide, and it's really what I consider to be the call to action. And, Pennsylvania is really, I want to say, at the forefront of encouraging responsible pipeline development. In the next decade, Pennsylvania will undergo substantial pipeline infrastructure build-out. We recognize that. We recognize that build-out will obviously transport gas to load centers, and it will create byproducts from thousands of wells that can be used, again, in helping our manufacturing. But it also comes with an unprecedented opportunity to encourage all the stakeholders to work in a collaborative process. So in Pennsylvania, our Governor Tom Wolf, in conjunction with our Department of Environmental Protection and the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, the Governor established a task force through executive order, and it basically looks at trying to develop on an advisory approach, not a mandated approach. The task force was looking to develop best practices around planning, siting, and routing, engaging more public participation, and again, looking at maximizing opportunities for effective permitting and developing a long-term operations and maintenance plan to ensure pipeline safety. You know, this is something that we talk about often at NARUC, but the reality is, you know, the states are being left to shoulder a heavier burden in terms of just overall pipeline safety development. And I'm proud of this Pipeline Safety Infrastructure Task Force. I think it creates a unique opportunity for Pennsylvania. And 2 years prior to that, we passed Act 127 here in Pennsylvania, which gave Pennsylvania PUC more responsibility of what we call non-federal jurisdictional pipelines. So we created close to 8 new pipeline safety inspectors. We've created a pipeline registry for all the operators here in the state, and there is I'm proud to report, an assessment mechanism. And we also have, as part of that regulatory construct, the very successful Pennsylvania shale gas impact fee, which from the time it was envisioned to enacted into law by Governor Corbett to giving the Public Utility Commission the responsibility of collecting and distributing the monies, we have distributed this year close to $1 billion of revenue back to 67 counties in Pennsylvania. It's really been a game changer. Some of the, and I hate to use that word, but it has been, because a lot of local communities that have used these dollars for conservation purposes, for tax reduction purposes, for infrastructure purposes, and again, we're not taking it into the state capitol and just letting it stay here. It's getting redistributed back out to those areas. And Pennsylvania has 67 counties, so every county is benefiting. The last point I'll make here is, again, create opportunities for enhanced communication around midstream operators and other key stakeholders, and I firmly believe that the Pipeline Infrastructure Task Force creates that opportunity. And then jumping down, maintain the protective adequacy of pipeline safety regulations. And again, I want to give a shout out to my colleague from New York. The Pipeline Safety Reauthorization Act, which was signed into law, I think over 2 weeks ago by President Obama, really sets up nicely. It's not everything, by the way, that the NARUC states want it, but it does set up more pipeline safety oversight of these emerging production centers in states like ours, in Ohio and Texas. So again, I think we have a lot of opportunities, but encouraging responsible pipeline development is so critically important, because we have to give our citizens and our states, we talked earlier about the benefits to the consumer, but also those consumers want to have peace of mind that this is being done with respect to the environment, respect to gas safety, respect to watershed protection. And I think Pennsylvania has arguably done a very good job in getting its regulatory compact in order. And by the way, we've done this in less than a 6-year period. That's truly remarkable. And again, I want to thank you for the opportunity here today to present some of the activities that are taking place around shale development in Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. I look forward to questions at the end. We're going to turn it over right now to Dr. James Bradbury, from the Office of Energy Policy and Systems Analysis at the Department of Energy. James, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Is someone advancing the slides, or do I do that somehow?
I will.
Okay, great. All right, well, thanks. Thank you, Commissioner Burman, and thank you to all of the participants, all the folks who are listening in. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to present for all of you my presentation today. There are really two parts to my talk. The first is focused on the prudent development of domestic oil and gas resources, and really it's about seizing the economic opportunity of shale resources, which of course was the thrust of Commissioner Powelson's talk, and really appreciate his remarks, and want to echo and agree with him. What a great boon, economic boon these resources have been. The other part of my talk is focused on really how we manage the risks of aging natural gas infrastructure and how we focus efforts on modernization as well. So this first slide that we're looking at here it's really showing, of course, natural gas production from 2007 to 2015. Those are the ramping up wedges going off to the right, and of course the blue area is the Marcellus, which Commissioner Powelson spoke to. But of course what we're seeing is an incredible increase in production across the country, and this is really what's been driving. This has really driven the transition in a mindset from energy scarcity to one of abundance. We think about our energy resources. Let's see. So I guess we could go to the. I guess the last thing I was going to say on this is we expect really to see continued growth in production and continuation of economic and energy security benefits for many more years to come. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Well, I'll just say on this one, the Department of Energy has done a great deal, made a great deal of investments in research and development to enable shale gas production, or I guess shale oil as well, the production of shale resources. The program started in the 1970s, and in the 1980s in particular, we had a $30 million program, coal bed methane program. Also the shale gas program, which followed that ended in 1992. That was a $137 million program, and following that was the unconventional oil and gas program, which concluded in 2013, which was $100 million and spread over many years. And looking forward, there's the methane hydrate program. This is one that we've proposed for FY17, requested an additional $23 million to tap into additional and new resources that are out in the methane hydrate deposits, continental shelf areas around the country. Advance to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Having trouble with the slide advancement. I guess I'll just pause for a second to say, you know, DOE's overarching research and development strategy for the prudent development of these resources is really driven by the need to balance two overarching policy objectives. We want to maximize the public benefits and also promote environmental stewardship. And as we maximize public benefits, there we're really talking about the energy security, economic security benefits. And then on the environment side, of course, we want to protect public health and public safety as well. And ultimately, DOEs, we want to be making investments in technologies in areas where industry has not yet invested. So we want to help to reduce risks associated with natural gas and oil production from unconventional resources and continue the productive use of these resources going forward. So let's go to the next slide. See, this slide seems to be two of them. Okay, great. So I think, yeah, if we can get to the next slide with the schematic research and development scope. So I'll say to this on this next slide, in 2011, the Department of Energy partnered with Department of Interior and EPA to coordinate our research efforts on unconventional oil and gas. Is it possible to go to the next slide? We're just getting stuck. Sorry, the listeners here. Okay, I'll press on. So really, the
numbers at the bottom. What number are you looking for?
I'm looking for the 18, please.
Okay, it's up.
Okay, that's the one that says next slide when I'm looking at my screen. I see 17 on the one that I'm the main slide. I'm looking for the next one. It says research and development scope at the top, if we could.
One is up.
Yeah, that's what everyone else is seeing. I'm at 100% audio of that slide.
Okay, I'm very, I guess I'm not really sure why. Okay, my screen display is odd. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so there are really 7 areas of focus to this research I just mentioned, which we've been partnered with, DOE partnered with Department of Interior and Environmental Protection Agency. So there's the transportation and storage. There's reducing the footprint of oil and gas production at the well site. Methane emissions, reducing those emissions, improving water quality and availability of water, so protecting those water resources. There's a great deal of subsurface science additionally going on to understand and better characterize the reservoirs of resources, and of course induce seismicity and understand and better mitigate those earthquake risks. Okay, so in DOE's strength really in these areas is primarily wellbore integrity, technology research and development, and system engineering, imaging, material sciences, and we continue to work in these science areas of science in the domestic and with international partners as well. So the next few slides, I'll go through a couple examples of some of our focus areas of this research. And one area in particular is on water quality and water availability. Now here, of course, if you care about water quality, then you care about wellbore integrity. If you care about wellbore integrity, then you care about the performance of cement. And DOE has this is one of our research areas, has a cross-cutting research on a number, so on cement performance, as I said, is one research focus area. We also have cross-cutting research in energy water nexus is what the program is called, and that's broadly across many different energy technology types. Let's see. So is everyone seeing the, sorry, Ivy, are people looking at the induced seismicity slide now?
That's what I'm showing.
Okay, so I'll move on to that. So I guess the one thing I'll say in terms of the energy water nexus, as many of you I'm sure know, we produce about 10 barrels of oil. Produce about 10 barrels of water for every barrel of oil and gas production. So water treatment solutions is also an important R&D focus area, and this really relates to this induced seismicity issue, where induced seismicity from oil and gas production operations, of course, is putting putting produced water in productive use. We want to reduce that induced seismicity and reduce that underground disposal activities of the wastewater in these underground injection wells. Of course, our current understanding is that there is a link between the underground injection of these disposal wells and the seismicity and the increase in seismicity that we've seen in parts of the country, and that's what I'll go on to the next slide, the map, if I could. And here with this map, what you see is the different areas of the country. Is the U.S. Geological Survey map of earthquakes since 1980, and then the areas that have really been impacted by seismicity more recently are highlighted in particular in these boxed areas. And there's a few states where, the top 6 states where we've seen an increase in seismicity, induced seismicity, are in order from highest to lowest in terms of potential hazard going forward is Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arkansas. And it's really been, I mean, as you may know, an incredible increase in the occurrence of earthquakes in these states. For example, in Oklahoma, I should say, I guess, in the central U.S. Area on this map, from 1973 to 2008, there was an average of 24 earthquakes of magnitude 3.0 and larger per year. And from 2009 to 2015, the rate steadily increased, averaging 318 per year and peaking in 2015 with over 1,000 earthquakes. So that's a very, obviously, significant increase. And actually, as I think, as many of you may know, the media reports lately, we've heard from the trade presses that the rate of earthquakes has actually declined in the Oklahoma area as the underground injections has declined as well. So moving on to the next slide. So another focus area is on reducing emissions, and here we're interested in reducing emissions really from a range of pollutants. Methane has been a particular area of focus. Of course, to the extent that we're reducing emissions and reducing leaks from the system, we're also conserving this valuable resource, avoiding waste of natural gas. And so in this way, the reducing methane emissions is kind of at the nexus between environmentally responsible development and also maximizing the economic benefits, if you will. So this slide, of course, shows a number of different research goals and research and development goals and where we've made progress. And I'll get back into some of this in subsequent slides, focusing on the Natural Gas Modernization Initiative as well. So going on to the next slide, I'm really starting into the final part of my talk, which really reflects the broader problems of and managing associated risk with aging infrastructure. And of course, this is the infrastructure we rely on to deliver this valuable product to customers. So this map here shows the Norfolk MSA, and based on some DOE, Department of Energy analysis of oil and gas facilities that are exposed to sea level rise and storm surge. So this map shows those facilities exposed to 1 foot of sea level rise in conjunction with a not super strong, a Category 1 hurricane. And what you see is there are a number of facilities that are exposed. It doesn't mean that they would necessarily be damaged, but it does suggest that these are areas that we want to look more carefully at to make sure that they're well supported and they're not going to be damaged by erosion or inundation in the case of a major storm hitting the coastal area. And so what we see here, there are 2 natural gas pipelines exposed just in this particular map area. And in this area, this is where we had our MAC group meeting, of course, is within the area of this map. So it's particularly relevant to that conversation. So I guess the question would be, why should utility commissioners care? I think probably anyone from the commission staff who's on the call is probably well aware. The resilience is really an aspect of reliability. And an analysis like this that the Office of Electricity did can help us to better manage risks associated with natural hazards of all types. In this case, we're really talking about climate risks and coastal risks as well. But we want to help, DOE wants to help provide tools that can help enable managing these risks better over time. So go to the next slide. I think actually the next, you can go to. All right, so of course, as we build resilience, I wanted to be looking at the pie chart. That's what people are looking at. Great. So as we work to build resilience and learn how to better adapt to a changing climate, it's also important to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are contributing to the climate change that we're seeing. And methane is of course natural gas. Natural gas is over 90% methane. So in most methane emissions come from well, this pie chart here shows your methane emissions from all sources. This represents about 11% of total greenhouse gas emissions from the U.S. And about a quarter of this is from natural gas and about 9% from petroleum. And so from the oil and gas sector, most of it's from the production stage. That's the big dark wedge here is the natural gas production, and the yellow wedge on the left is oil production. So why do we care about methane? So pound for pound, methane is over 25 times as effective as carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. It has a residence time in the atmosphere of only about 16 years. So because of these 2 factors, when you reduce methane emissions, you have really significant near-term benefits for the climate. So that's a big reason why this has been a focus area for this administration. And I should point out, well, we'll go to the next slide and I'll speak to other aspects of the broader strategy we have at the administration. So there's a climate action plan. It was first released in July of 2013, looked at a whole range of different greenhouse gas emissions and initiated strategy to reduce methane emissions in particular. And that strategy was released in March 2014. And it calls for working with industry and with states, and subsequently the administration has set a goal of reducing methane emissions from oil and gas sector by 40 to 45% by 2025. And this target has also been recently adopted and embraced by Canada and Mexico as well. So it's a North American target. And I'll just point out here, of the three main pillars of the strategy, the first two are really the focus area for DOE. We want to assess current emissions data and improve our understanding of where the leaks and emissions are coming from. And we want to identify the technologies and best practices that helps us find those leaks and reduce emissions. Moving on to the next slide. So I'll just conclude. I'm sorry, so this is are we looking at the Natural Gas Modernization Initiative? That's what we should be looking at. Thank you. So there are a number of different initiatives that we have at DOE. Secretary Moniz is committed to addressing the issue of methane emissions. He hosted 5 stakeholder roundtable meetings in 2014 to help inform our strategy. And this slide really lays out the key elements of our strategy. The ARPA-E program had a really great and exciting program funding 11 projects to develop lower cost methane sensing technologies. Office of Fossil Energy has $12 million in this fiscal year to help improve emissions quantification and also develop methane emission mitigation technologies. We've also worked with FERC on this issue. The last point I'll make here is of course, the DOE NARUC partnership, which is designed for us to help provide technical assistance to NARUC and commissioners and staff, and we'd like to do that on an ongoing basis. This webinar, of course, is part of that effort, and we welcome your input and suggestions on how to maximize the benefits of this effort. Okay, so go on to the next slide, and this is the next slide on the Interagency Task Force on Natural Gas Storage Safety. This was really the administration response to the Aliso Canyon incident. This task force is co-chaired by Department of Energy and PHMSA with support from several different agencies across the federal government. We're working, of course, with folks in California. Overall, I guess just be aware that the task force is conducting a range of studies, and that the results from those studies are going to be published in just about 3 months from now. We got started on this work about 3 or so months ago. We're focusing on DOE on the well integrity issue and also on broader implications for energy reliability as well. So that's the final slide. I think we could go. I included a slide here, actually one on the Natural Gas Infrastructure Modernization Partnership. This just provides a little bit more detail on what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and who's involved among the commissioners and members of the partnership from the NARUC side. We can go to the summary slide, the final slide, which is just to emphasize that, at DOE there are actually several different offices and research efforts that are ongoing. And overall, our vision of the Fossil Energy Office is to develop a secure and environmentally sound energy future through responsible production of resources. And at the Policy Office, which is where I sit, our efforts are really around the modernization effort and help our nation's natural gas pipeline, transmission, distribution systems become more reliable and safe and reduce emissions. And of course, we've made great progress. We want to acknowledge that the states have done a huge amount, pipeline replacement programs, and many other things to help move us in this direction, and we want to just continue to support those efforts. Is really our goal. And then the final slide is just the contact information for me, James Bradbury, and my colleague Christopher Freitas in the Office of Fossil Energy. We look forward to being in touch with all of you if you have questions. I think we're prepared to do that.
Wonderful. This is Commissioner Diane Berman. I think with the increases in U.S. natural gas production, usage, and commercialization of natural gas, it's changing the regulatory landscape for the U.S. natural gas industry and its customers. And as economic regulators, we are most concerned with reliable and cost-effective operation of our natural gas pipeline infrastructure, which is critical to our economy and our security. And as we can see from Commissioner Powelson and Dr. Bradbury, that the economic regulators working with the relevant federal officials can really partner around ways to have the development of this valuable commodity in a safe way. It's also interesting to me to see that shale production has really been adding to the resource base, and as we saw from Commissioner Powelson in the Northeast, and in particular in Pennsylvania, it really is helping to open up alternative fuel markets. You know, for example, UGI and Philadelphia Gas Works, which are both Pennsylvania-based companies, are really looking at their exploration and how to harness it for LNG customers. And I think in the call to action that Commissioner Powelson laid out, it really shows that by encouraging pipeline development and working on communication issues and helping to enhance that communication and look at the necessary resources that are out there, we do work towards having economic development opportunities that are safe and reliable and cost-effective for our customers. In particular, I again want to thank both DOE and NARUC for putting together this partnership and establishing this first in the series of many webinars where we can get out the information, and to thank Commissioner Powelson and Dr. Bradbury for showcasing an important topic and what regulators can do and sort of the state of the state for shale resources really has been teed up here. Before we go offline, because it is a hard stop at 2, Commissioner Powelson or Dr. Bradbury, do you want to say any final comments?
No, sorry, this is James. Sorry we went on a little bit long. I was looking forward to questions, but I really appreciate everyone's participation, those who called in.
Great. And this webinar will be is being recorded, so it will be posted, and then it'll give us the opportunity for questions that might come afterwards. And also, this is you know, really a tee up to Nashville. NARUC is having its annual summer meeting in Nashville in 2 weeks, and a lot of these issues will be discussed further there. So if you haven't registered already, everyone should do so, because it's going to be a wonderful meeting that the Gas Committee is ready for, with many different panels that will be helpful. So with that, Ivy, do you have any further
No, thank
comments?
you very much. I appreciate it. Everyone who participated and the presenters, and you, Mr. Burman.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, thank you to Commissioner Powelson and to Dr. Bradbury and to the NARUC staff and DOE.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.